There's an old idea that you can learn everything you need to know about a company by watching how it treats the people nobody thinks are watching. I didn't set out to test that idea on purpose. It just turned out to be the most useful 4 weeks I ever spent as the founder of my own company. I'd started Ridgeline Data almost 9 years earlier, in the kind of cramped apartment story every founder tells at conferences, and by the time this happened, we had 200 and change employees spread across a regional office I'd only visited a handful of times that year. The company had grown past the point where I could feel it anymore. I could read the quarterly numbers. I could sit in board meetings and nod at growth charts. What I couldn't do was tell you what it actually felt like to work there, day to day, on a floor I no longer walked. So when our regional office manager left abruptly, a resignation letter that was polite on the surface and said almost nothing underneath, the kind that makes you wonder what it's not saying, I didn't fly in for a round of exit interviews. I did something my board would have called reckless if I'd asked permission first, which is exactly why I didn't ask. I called our facilities contractor, asked if they had an opening on the overnight and early morning cleaning crew for that office, and told them I needed the job. Not undercover in the dramatic, hidden camera sense. Just quietly, under my middle name, with a story about needing part-time work while I figured some things out. Nobody at that office had ever met me in person. My headshots were 9 years old and buried on page 4 of a Google search nobody in facilities was going to run. I bought a set of coveralls, learned how to operate an industrial floor buffer badly enough to look authentic, and showed up at 5 a.m. on a Monday. For the first week, I mostly learned logistics, which trash cans overflowed fastest, which conference room always smelled like burnt popcorn, which printer jammed on a schedule you could set a watch to. Ordinary stuff. Useful in its own way, but not the reason I was there. The reason I was there became clear during the second week, in the break room, at 6:45 a.m., when 3 of the office's senior managers started arriving early for what I'd later learn was a standing pre-meeting meeting, the kind where the actual decisions get made before the real meeting makes them look official. I was refilling the coffee station. I said good morning. 2 of them didn't look up. The third, a director named Pearson, looked directly at me and kept talking, mid-sentence, about a client account, as if the man 12 inches away restocking creamer cups had the security clearance of a filing cabinet. Over the following 2 weeks, I heard almost everything because almost nobody adjusts their conversation for a person holding a mop. I heard Pearson describe an entire quarter's worth of missed deliverables to a client as just optics will manage, while privately telling his own team the deadlines had been impossible from day one and someone would need to own that mess if it surfaced. I heard a second manager, Whitfield, casually mention that he'd been quietly padding his team's headcount requests for 2 years to build what he called, laughing, his own little kingdom, fully aware nobody above him was checking the math. I heard a third, a woman named Odom in client relations, openly mock an employee on medical leave in front of her own direct reports, wondering aloud, in a tone she clearly thought was hilarious, whether the leave was even real. None of it was said to me. All of it was said in front of me, because in front of me had apparently stopped counting as in front of anyone. I didn't confront a single person during those 4 weeks. I emptied trash cans. I buffed floors at 5 in the morning. I said good morning to people who never said it back, and I wrote down. I scheduled an all-hands meeting for the following Monday, through official channels this time, under my actual name, which triggered exactly the kind of confused, scrambling energy you'd expect from an office suddenly told the founder was flying in with no advance notice and no stated agenda. I walked in wearing a suit instead of coveralls. I want to tell you, there was a dramatic gasp, a movie moment, someone dropping a coffee cup in slow motion. Mostly what happened was a long, uncomfortable silence, followed by Pearson going the color of drywall as he did the math on exactly how many mornings he'd talked freely in front of the man who just walked in wearing a name tag that said, Founder and CEO. I didn't read my notebook out loud. I didn't need the theater of it. I simply said that I'd spent the last month working on their floor, that I'd learned a great deal about how the office actually operated versus how it was reported to operate, and that I'd be having individual follow-up conversations with several people over the coming days. Then I thanked the actual custodial staff, the real ones who'd trained me, covered for my mediocre buffer skills, and never once treated me as beneath a conversation, by name, in front of everyone, which felt like the only part of that meeting that mattered as much as the part everyone else was bracing for. The follow-up conversations were not dramatic either, which somehow made them worse for the people involved. Pearson's client account issues, once actually investigated instead of managed as optics, turned out to involve enough misrepresentation to a client that legal got involved before HR finished its own review. He was gone within 2 weeks. Whitfield's headcount padding got unwound through an audit that, once someone finally looked, took about 3 days to fully expose. He resigned before the audit's findings were formally presented to him, which tends to happen when people can do their own math. Odom stayed longest, technically, surviving on a formal warning, until 2 more employees came forward with their own accounts of how she treated anyone she considered beneath a conversation worth having politely, at which point, technically surviving, ran out of runway entirely. The employee who'd been mocked for her medical leave got a personal call from me, an apology that was overdue by roughly a month longer than it should have been, and a level of support going forward that no policy document could have promised as convincingly as showing up did. I didn't do any of this to prove a point about leadership philosophy for a future keynote, though I'll admit I've told the story at exactly one, reluctantly, after someone asked how I really knew what was happening on the ground. I did it because numbers on a dashboard cannot tell you how someone talks about an employee on medical leave when they think nobody who matters is listening. Only actually being there can tell you that. And it turns out the cheapest, most honest audit a company can ever run isn't a consultant with a clipboard. It's just showing up, saying good morning, and quietly noticing who bothers to say it back. If this one hit different, hit subscribe to Hidden Truth Chronicles. We've got plenty more stories about people who got seen for exactly who they really were, whether they wanted to be or not. Drop a comment below. Do you think you'd have recognized the founder, or would you have talked right past him too? See you in the next one.